Ever feel like you're just spinning your wheels? Putting in the hours, the late nights, tons of effort, but still not getting anywhere.
Oh, absolutely. That feeling of disconnect when the effort just doesn't seem to match the results. It can be so draining.
It reminded me of that anecdote from one of the sources we've been looking at. The author, a junior doctor on Christmas Day, surrounded by everything they'd worked for, yet feeling that dream slipping away. Made me wonder if there's a different way.
It's interesting, isn't it? We tend to think, just work harder, push through. But what if the answer is not about more effort, but about a totally different approach to productivity?
Right, like what if feeling good was actually the key?
Exactly. That's what's so fascinating about this idea of feel-good productivity.
Especially as it's presented in Ali Abdaal's book, it seems kind of counterintuitive. We usually think, be productive, then you'll feel good.
Yeah, like it's the reward. But the sources we've been diving into suggest it's not just the outcome, it's a crucial ingredient.
Like, our emotional state actually fuels our effectiveness.
And there's research backing this up. Positive emotions can actually change how our brains work, making us more creative, more motivated.
So that's what we're unpacking in this deep dive, pulling out the insights from these different sources. We've got personal stories, scientific studies, practical advice.
Like Alice Eason's work on the candle problem, which shows how positive emotions can lead to more creative solutions.
It's all about understanding how feeling good helps us achieve more. And of course, feel more fulfilled along the way.
Right, absolutely. So where should we start?
Well, one of the first things that jumped out at me was this idea of play as a key energizer. And I don't mean slacking off. It's more about bringing a playful mindset to our work.
Makes sense. Play isn't just for kids. It's a basic human need, right? It fuels creativity, boosts our mood.
And it can make us more productive. The sources highlight different dimensions within play, and the first one that caught my eye was adventure.
Adventure. Okay, so we're not all going to be scaling mountains or exploring the Amazon.
Right. It's more about engaging with the world around us with a sense of curiosity and openness to new experiences. There was this 2020 experiment that used GPS to track people's emotions.
Using GPS? That's interesting. How did that work?
Well, they found that experiencing a sense of adventure, like exploring a new part of town or trying a new activity, was directly linked to feeling more positive emotions.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So our mindset, our approach to the everyday, can actually shape our emotional well-being.
Exactly. And this ties in nicely with Stuart Brown's work on play personalities. He identified different ways people naturally enjoy playing.
Play personalities like what?
So you've got the collector who loves to gather and organize things, the joker who loves humor and making people laugh, the director who enjoys planning and leading, the kinesthete who thrives on physical activity. There are a bunch of them.
So the idea is that we can leverage these natural inclinations to make our work more engaging.
That's the point. Knowing your play personality can help you reframe tasks. Like, if you're a storyteller, you might find ways to turn that dry report into a compelling narrative.
Or, if you're a creator, you could make that spreadsheet visually appealing, almost like a piece of art.
I love that. And speaking of bringing a playful approach to work, the concept of side quests really resonated with me.
Side quests, like in video games.
Exactly. It's about adding these little mini adventures to your day. Instead of just focusing on the main mission, you create opportunities for exploration and discovery.
So how do you apply that to real life?
It could be something as simple as working from a different coffee shop, trying out a new software feature, or even, as Matthew Dix did, setting yourself a fun challenge within your routine.
Dix. Who's that?
He shared an anecdote about working a pretty mundane job. He'd create these little games for himself, like trying to convince a certain number of customers to try a specific BBQ sauce.
Okay, so it's about injecting novelty into your routine, right?
Sure.
Even if it's just a small thing.
Yeah, exactly. Just asking yourself, what's today's side quest going to be, can make a big difference.
I like that. It's about breaking up the monotony and keeping things fresh. And it remind me of something else from the sources, the power of fun. That story about Richard Feynman.
The Nobel Prize-winning physicist?
Yeah, him. He rediscovered his passion for physics
Yeah.
by just playing around with a wobbling plate, just messing around, no importance whatsoever, as he put it. And that's what led him to some incredible breakthroughs.
It's mind-blowing, isn't it? Letting go of the pressure to be brilliant actually unlocked his brilliance.
That no importance whatsoever attitude created space for genuine curiosity and exploration. And that's when the magic happened.
It's about approaching things with sincerity rather than just seriousness.
Exactly. Like those people you see playing games who are totally engaged, but not so fixated on winning that they can't laugh at themselves when they mess up.
It's about being present in the process, enjoying the ride, rather than just obsessing over the outcome.
I like that. It's about being fully present and engaged, but without all the tension and anxiety that comes with taking ourselves too seriously.
So play is one energizer. The second one the sources highlight is power.
Power. But not in the dominating others sense, right?
Right. It's about our own sense of personal empowerment, feeling capable and in control of our work and our lives.
So it's about feeling like our actions and decisions matter.
Exactly. And the sources break this down into two key aspects: self-efficacy and autonomy.
Okay, let's unpack those. What's self-efficacy?
It's basically believing in your ability to do something. And the important point here is that it's not a fixed trait. It's something we can actually cultivate and strengthen.
So it's not like some people are just born confident and others aren't.
Right. Bandura, the psychologist who did a lot of research on this, showed that our beliefs about our capabilities actually influence our actions and outcomes.
So if you believe you can do something, you're more likely to put in the effort, persevere, and ultimately succeed.
Exactly. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And there are some really cool techniques for boosting self-efficacy. One is the confidence switch.
The what?
The confidence switch. It's basically acting as if you're confident even when you don't feel it. It might sound fake, but it can actually work.
Fake it till you make it.
Kind of, but it's more about embodying the behaviors and mindset of someone who's confident. And that outward shift can actually start to change how you feel internally.
Interesting. So it's like you trick your brain into feeling more confident.
In a way, yeah. I even shared a personal anecdote in the material about this. Back when I was a walk-around magician, I used to do this all the time. I'd pretend to be way more confident than I actually was.
And did it work?
It really did. The more I acted confident, the more I actually started to feel confident.
That's cool. So what else? What other techniques are there for boosting self-efficacy?
Another one is the social model method. It's about learning from watching others succeed.
Like having role models.
Exactly. There was this study at Clemson University where they had people try to climb a wall. Some participants watched a video of someone else successfully climbing the wall before their attempt, and guess what?
They did better.
They did. They felt more confident and actually performed better just from watching someone else do it.
So surrounding yourself with inspiring people, or even just consuming content from those who are achieving what you want to achieve, can be really beneficial.
Absolutely. It shows you what's possible and provides a sort of blueprint for success.
I like that. It's like vicarious mastery.
Then there's enactive mastery, which is about learning through doing. Like, think about Luke Skywalker in Star Wars.
Oh yeah, he starts out as this farm boy with big dreams.
Exactly. And he faces all these challenges, makes mistakes, but keeps pushing forward. And through that process, he develops his skills and becomes a Jedi Master.
It's a classic hero's journey.
It is, and it illustrates the power of enactive mastery. It's the same with Katniss in the Hunger Games, or Aang in Avatar, The Last Airbender. They all grow through facing challenges.
So it's not about avoiding challenges, but embracing them as opportunities for growth.
Right. And there's this concept called the Shoshin approach, or beginner's mind, which emphasizes approaching things with a sense of openness and curiosity, like a beginner. It's about letting go of preconceived notions and being willing to learn from every experience. And then there's the protege effect.
Protege effect.
Yeah, it's the idea that teaching others actually reinforces your own learning. There was a study at Stanford where they had 8th graders teach biology to avatars.
To avatars.
Yeah, like computer-generated characters. And the students who taught the avatars actually ended up understanding the material better themselves.
So explaining things to others helps you solidify your own knowledge.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's self-efficacy. What about the second aspect of power?
Autonomy, right?
Right. Autonomy is that sense of ownership and control over our work, and it's a huge driver of intrinsic motivation.
It's intrinsic motivation. It's that motivation that comes from within, from the enjoyment of the task itself. It's different from extrinsic motivation, which is driven by external rewards or punishments.
Like getting paid to do something or avoiding getting in trouble.
Exactly. And research shows that intrinsic motivation is way more powerful and sustainable.
So how do we cultivate autonomy in our work?
One way is to focus on the why behind what we're doing, the commander's intent, as the sources call it. It's about understanding the bigger picture, the purpose behind the task.
It gives meaning to the work.
Exactly. Like I shared an example about my initial goal to get six-pack abs.
You wanted six-pack abs.
I did, yeah. But I realized I didn't really have a clear why behind it. It was just this vague idea of looking good.
It wasn't really connected to anything deeper.
Right. So it was hard to stay motivated.
Mhm.
But when you have a strong why, it makes it easier to push through the challenges.
So knowing the purpose fuels motivation. What else can we do?
Another strategy is to set what the sources call NICE goals.
Nice goals.
Yeah. It stands for near-term, input-based, controllable, and energizing.
So it's a different way of setting goals than the traditional SMART goals.
It is. SMART goals are great, but NICE goals are particularly useful when it comes to fostering autonomy.
How so?
Well, they focus on aspects of a task that we have direct control over.
Makes sense. If you feel like you're in control, you're more likely to feel motivated.
Exactly. And NICE goals are designed to be energizing, so they help us stay motivated and avoid getting bogged down.
And what about situations where you can't have complete control?
Even then, you can still own the process, as the sources put it.
What does that mean?
Like, there was this example of a guy who automated a bunch of his tasks using software. He couldn't control the tasks themselves, but he could control how he approached them.
So it's about finding ways to take ownership, even in limited situations.
Exactly. And there's this powerful mindset shift that the sources talk about, moving from have to choose to.
I've heard that before.
It's amazing how much of a difference it can make. There was even a study that showed that simply writing about choices increased people's feelings of power.
So it's about reframing obligations as choices.
Right. And it reminds me of that Viktor Frankl quote. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given circumstance.
Powerful.
So even when things are tough, we still have the power to choose how we respond.
That's a good reminder. Okay, so we've got play and power. What's the third energizer?
The third one is people. It's all about the feel-good effects of our social connections.
Makes sense. We're social creatures.
We are. And our relationships with others have a huge impact on our mood, our motivation, our well-being.
Absolutely. So how do we tap into this people energy?
Well, the sources talk about several strategies. One is find your scene.
Your scene, like your tribe.
Yeah, something like that. It's about finding your people, your community, the people who inspire you, support you, challenge you.
Like Brian Eno's story.
Exactly. Remember how his chance encounter at an art school party led to the formation of Roxy Music?
Yeah. He just happened to meet these musicians who were looking for a synth player, and the rest is history.
It just goes to show how powerful it can be to surround yourself with the right people.
So it's about finding an environment that nourishes your creativity and motivation.
Exactly.
And then there's become a team player.
Isn't that a bit of a cliche?
It might sound that way, but there's real science behind it. There was this study where they had people work on puzzles, and they found that people were more motivated when they believed a helpful tip came from a fellow participant rather than the researcher.
Interesting. So it's about feeling like you're part of a team working towards a shared goal.
Exactly. It's about shifting from a competitor mindset to a comrade mindset.
I like that, seeing your colleagues as allies rather than rivals.
And then there's find synchronicity. It's the idea that even working in sync with others without direct collaboration can be beneficial.
Like what? They did a study where they had people tap their fingers in sync, and they found that it increased feelings of connection and cooperation.
Wow. Even something as simple as that.
And there's the concept of co-working, even remotely, like those online writing sprints or the London Writers Salon's Writers Hour.
So it's about creating a sense of shared rhythm and focus, even if you're working independently.
Exactly. And then we have give and receive. It's about the power of both giving and receiving support.
Okay, how does giving support boost our feel-good productivity?
Well, there's this thing called the helper's high. When we help others, our brains release feel-good hormones like dopamine and oxytocin.
So it literally makes us feel good.
And there's evidence suggesting it can even have positive effects on our health.
Wow. And what about receiving support?
That's where the Benjamin Franklin effect comes in. It's this counterintuitive idea that asking someone for a favor can actually make them like you more.
Really? Why is that?
It's thought to be because it creates a sense of reciprocity. They've done you a favor, so they're more likely to feel positively towards you.
That's fascinating.
And it highlights the importance of being willing to ask for help. We often hesitate because we don't want to burden others.
Or appear incompetent.
But actually, asking for help can strengthen our relationships and boost everyone's mood.
It's a win-win. And what about communication? I know that's something you've emphasized in the past.
Yeah, over-communicate is the last piece of the people energizer.
Over-communicate.
Hmm.
So talk more than you think you need to.
Exactly. It's something I had to learn the hard way in my own ventures. We often underestimate how much communication is necessary, especially when working with others.
It prevents misunderstandings and builds trust.
Exactly. And it's not just about communicating the good news. It's also about being open about the challenges and setbacks.
How do you do that effectively?
The sources talk about the concept of radical candor. It's about being direct and honest in your feedback, but also caring personally about the person you're talking to.
So it's about being clear and specific, but also kind and respectful.
Exactly. And it's crucial for creating a healthy and productive work environment.
Okay, so we've covered the energizers: play, power, people. But what about the things that block our productivity? Procrastination, for example.
Yeah, procrastination, it's the bane of so many people's existence.
We all do it sometimes.
We do, but the sources we've been exploring frame procrastination not as laziness, but often as a response to negative emotions.
Interesting. So it's not just a lack of willpower.
Right, and they introduce this unblock method for overcoming procrastination.
Unblock method, what's that about?
It's about identifying and addressing the underlying feelings that lead us to put things off.
So what are those feelings?
The sources highlight three main blockers: uncertainty, fear, and inertia.
Okay, let's start with uncertainty. How does that lead to procrastination?
Well, when we're uncertain about something, our brains go into hypervigilance mode. We start scanning for threats, and that can lead us to avoid the task altogether.
It's like our brains are trying to protect us from potential danger.
Exactly. And that's where the concept of commander's intent comes in again.
Commander's intent. We talked about that before in the context of autonomy.
Yeah, it's relevant here too. It's about clarifying the why behind the task. When we have a clear understanding of the purpose, it makes it easier to navigate uncertainty.
Because you have a North Star guiding you.
Right. Like I shared that example about my goal to get six-pack abs. I realized that I was procrastinating because I didn't really know why I wanted them.
It wasn't a meaningful goal.
Right. And that made it hard to stay motivated.
So knowing the why helps us deal with uncertainty. What else can we do?
Well, there's this technique called the 5 whys method. It's about asking yourself why repeatedly to drill down to the root cause of your procrastination.
Give you an example.
Say you're procrastinating on writing a report. You ask yourself, why am I putting this off? Maybe the answer is because it feels overwhelming. So you asked again, why does it feel overwhelming? And maybe the answer is because I don't know where to start. And you keep asking why until you get to the real heart of the issue.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion.
Exactly. And once you understand the root cause, it's easier to find a solution.
So that's for uncertainty about the why. What about uncertainty about the what? The task itself.
Well, the sources recommend setting nice goals, remember, near-term, input-based, controllable, and energizing.
Because they give us a sense of control.
Exactly. And they help us break down the task into smaller, more manageable steps.
It makes it less daunting.
Right. And then for uncertainty about when to do things, there's this technique called implementation intentions. It's about creating an if-then plan.
If-then, like if I finish my morning coffee, then I'll work on that report.
Exactly. It's a way of linking the desired action to an existing habit.
So it makes it more automatic, less reliant on willpower.
Exactly.
Okay, that's uncertainty. What about fear?
Fear is another big blocker. And the first step to overcoming fear is to get to know it.
Get to know your fear. How do you do that?
By labeling your emotions. There was this study with arachnophobes, people who are terrified of spiders.
Arachnophobia, yeah, that was a common one.
They had these people go through exposure therapy, gradually getting closer and closer to a tarantula, but some of the participants were instructed to label their fear as they were doing it, like saying, I'm feeling anxious right now, or my heart is racing.
Did it make a difference?
A huge difference. The people who labeled their fear were much more likely to actually touch the tarantula at the end of the experiment.
Wow. So putting your feelings into words can actually lessen their power.
Exactly. It helps us process them rather than being overwhelmed by them.
That's really interesting.
And it applies to all sorts of feels, not just spiders. Like maybe you're afraid of public speaking.
Public speaking, yeah, that's a big one.
By acknowledging that fear, saying to yourself, okay, I'm feeling anxious about this presentation, you actually start to take some of the power away from it.
So label the fear. What else can we do?
Well, another strategy is to try to understand where the fear comes from. Like, ask yourself, what am I actually afraid of in this situation?
Like, what's the worst that could happen?
Yeah, or what are the underlying beliefs that are fueling this fear?
Okay, so get to know the fear. What then?
Then you can start to reduce your fear. The sources share a few techniques for this. One is the 10-10-10 rule.
What's that?
It's about asking yourself 3 questions. How will I feel about this in 10 minutes? How will I feel about this in 10 months? How will I feel about this in 10 years?
It's about gaining perspective.
Exactly. It helped you see that your current worries might not be as big of a deal in the long run.
I like that. And what else?
Another technique is the confidence equation.
Just that's mathematical.
It is, sort of. It's about focusing on your successes and positive interpretations while minimizing the impact of failures and negative self-talk.
So it's about shifting your focus to the positive.
Right. And it reminds me of that saying, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
So just make a start, even if it's imperfect.
Exactly. Taking action, even a small step, can often help to lessen our fears.
Makes sense. And then the last step is to overcome the fear.
Right. And there are some really creative techniques for this. One that I found fascinating is the idea of using an alter ego.
An alter ego. Like a superhero persona.
Kind of. It's about creating a separate identity that you can step into when facing a fear-inducing situation.
Like Adele.
Exactly. She uses the alter ego, Sasha Carter, inspired by Beyoncé's Sasha Fierce, to help her manage stage fright.
So it's like creating a psychological distance from your fears.
Right. And there's actually research supporting this. They did a study with kids where they had them wear a Batman cape while doing a challenging task.
And they did better with the cape on.
They did. It's called the Batman effect. It seems like embodying a different persona can actually help us access different capabilities.
That's so cool.
And then there's the spotlight effect, which is the tendency to overestimate how much other people are paying attention to us.
We think everyone's noticing our every flaw.
Right. But the reality is most people are too busy worrying about themselves to be judging us.
So remembering that no one really cares can be liberating.
Absolutely. It can help us let go of the fear of judgment and just go for it.
Okay, so we've tackled uncertainty and fear. What about inertia?
Inertia is that feeling of being stuck, unable to get started. It's the I just can't be arsed feeling.
We've all been there.
And the first step to overcoming inertia is to reduce environmental friction.
Environmental friction.
It's about making it as easy as possible to take the desired action. Like, I shared that example of my guitar practice. I used to keep my guitar tucked away in a closet, and I'd
Nice.
constantly procrastinate on practicing.
Because it was too much effort to get it out.
Exactly. But then I started leaving it out on a stand in my living room, and I started practicing way more just because it was right there, ready to go.
So make it easy. Reduce the barriers.
Right. And then there's emotional friction, which is that feeling of CBA.
Can't be arsed.
Yep. And for that, Matt Mockery, a tech investor and advisor, has this great advice. Identify 1, 2, or 3 ridiculously small next action steps.
Ridiculously small.
Yeah, like so small that it feels almost silly not to do them. Like if you're procrastinating on studying, the first step might be to simply open the textbook.
Or if you're putting off going to the gym, just put on your workout clothes.
Exactly. It's about making the starting point so easy that you can't help but take action.
And once you get started, it's easier to keep going.
Exactly. It's all about building momentum. Like Newton's first law of motion. An object at rest tends to stay at rest.
But an object in motion tends to stay in motion.
Right. So the key is to just get started, even with a tiny step. And another helpful technique is to get an accountability buddy.
Someone to hold you accountable.
Exactly. It's amazing how much more likely we are to follow through when we know someone else is expecting us to.
It's that gentle pressure that can make a big difference.
And finally, and this is so important, forgive yourself.
Forgive yourself
Yeah.
for procrastinating.
Yeah. Michael Wohl, a procrastination researcher, has found that self-forgiveness is crucial for breaking the cycle of guilt and further procrastination.
Because if you beat yourself up for procrastinating, you're more likely to do it again.
Exactly. It's about acknowledging that you're human, that everyone procrastinates sometimes, and giving yourself permission to move on.
Okay, so we've covered the energizers and the unblockers. But how do we sustain this feel-good productivity over the long haul?
That's where the idea of sustain comes in. It's about making these principles a sustainable part of our lives and avoiding burnout.
Burnout. Yeah, that's a big one.
It is, and the sources highlight 3 key aspects of sustain: conserve, recharge, and align.
Okay, let's break those down. What's conserve all about?
Conserve is about managing our energy effectively and avoiding overexertion burnout.
Overexertion burnout.
Yeah, it's that feeling of being completely fried from pushing ourselves too hard for too long. Like, I experienced that Christmas Eve I mentioned earlier.
You were working too much.
Way too much. And it's not just about the hours, it's about the intensity.
So it's about pacing ourselves.
Exactly. The sources use this great analogy of LeBron the sprinter versus LeBron the walker.
LeBron James,
Yeah.
the basketball player.
Yep. They say that if LeBron sprinted at full speed all the time, he'd burn out in no time. But by pacing himself, by conserving his energy, he can play at a high level for much longer.
Makes sense.
And it applies to all of us. We can't sprint all the time. We need to learn to walk sometimes.
So how do we do that? How do we conserve our energy?
One key strategy is to be more discerning about what we say yes to. The sources talk about the hell yeah or no filter.
Hell yeah or no.
Yeah, it's about only taking on commitments that we're truly excited about.
If it's not a hell yeah, it's a no.
Exactly. And it's also about being mindful of the opportunity costs of our commitments.
Opportunity costs.
It's the idea that every time we say yes to one thing, we're saying no to something else.
So we need to be strategic about what we choose to prioritize.
Exactly. And there's this thing called the 6-week trap.
6-week trap. What's that?
It's the tendency to underestimate how long things will actually take. Like, you agree to a project that seems like it'll only take a few weeks, but then it ends up dragging on for months.
I've definitely fallen into that trap before.
I think we all have. So it's important to be realistic about our time commitments. And then there's the issue of distractions.
Distractions.
They're everywhere. And there's research showing that multitasking actually makes us less efficient.
It's a myth.
It is. Our brains just aren't designed to focus on multiple things at once.
No, we need to learn to single task.
Exactly. And there are some simple techniques for minimizing distractions. Like David Lengel, a productivity expert, shared that he intentionally added friction to his phone use.
Friction.
Like he logged out of all his social media apps so that it took more effort to access them.
So it's about making it less convenient to get distracted.
Right. And sometimes just the act of putting your phone in another room can make a big difference.
Out of sight, out of mind.
And it's important to remember that not all distractions are bad. Sometimes we need a break.
A break from work.
Yeah, and even short breaks can make a big difference. There was this study where they had people do a hand grip test, and they found that people who took short breaks were able to maintain their grip strength for longer.
So breaks actually help us to stay focused.
They do, and it's something that a lot of high performers swear by. Like, there was this anecdote about an emergency department consultant who mandated regular breaks for his team.
He forced them to take breaks.
He did, and it actually improved their performance.
Oh.
So it's important to schedule breaks into your day, even if it's just for 5 or 10 minutes at a time.
And what should we do during those breaks?
Well, it depends. Sometimes a complete disconnect is best. But the sources also talk about the concept of energizing distraction.
Energizing distractions.
Yeah, it's about engaging in activities that actually recharge us.
Like what?
It could be anything from listening to music to taking a walk in nature to spending time with loved ones.
So it's about finding activities that replenish our energy rather than